They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But on Wall Street, it's served with a side of calculated destruction and a garnish worth exactly $127,849,023.18. And sometimes, it requires you to become the very thing you're trying to destroy. What the newspapers didn't report, what nobody knew except for a select few, was that Richard's betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about power, about proving he was smarter than everyone else. The same drive that had made him such a brilliant partner had ultimately corrupted him. I should have seen it coming years earlier, when he proposed our first, aggressive, tax strategy. I still remember the day I realized my best friend and business partner had betrayed me. It wasn't the offshore accounts that gave him away, or even the missing client funds. It was his smile. That same warm, confident smile he'd worn when we'd first met as ambitious 20-somethings at Goldman Sachs. The smile that had convinced hundreds of clients to trust us with their life savings. The smile that hadn't changed one bit when he'd framed me for his crimes and watched me being escorted out of our office by security. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how Richard Collins destroyed my life, and how I orchestrated his downfall, we need to go back to the beginning. 15 years ago, we were just two hungry kids with Ivy League degrees and dreams bigger than our student loan debts. I was the numbers guy, the one who could spot market patterns others missed. Richard was the closer, the smooth-talking charmer who could convince an Eskimo to buy ice. Together, we were unstoppable. We started small, working the phones at Goldman until our fingers bled and our voices went hoarse. But we had a vision: Paramount Capital Partners. A boutique investment firm that would combine old-school relationship building with cutting-edge algorithmic trading. Within 3 years, we'd saved enough to strike out on our own. Within 5, we were managing over $1 billion in assets. The success was intoxicating. Private jets to client meetings in the Hamptons. Vacation homes in Aspen and Saint-Tropez. Our faces on the cover of Forbes, heralding us as the new kings of Wall Street. The dynamic duo disrupting finance, they called us. If only they knew how prophetic that headline would become. The first sign something was wrong came from Sarah Chen, our head of compliance. She'd noticed irregularities in some of our offshore accounts, tiny discrepancies that most people would miss. But Sarah wasn't most people. She'd worked at the SEC before joining us, and she had a nose for fraud that would put a bloodhound to shame. "Jack, something's not adding up," she told me one night, spreading documents across my desk long after most of our employees had gone home. "These transaction patterns, they're designed to hide something." I remember laughing it off. "Sarah, you're too good at your job. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar." But she wouldn't let it go. 3 days later, she sent me an encrypted email with more evidence. An hour after that, she was fired. Richard had discovered her unauthorized investigation and terminated her for breach of protocol. When I confronted him, he was all reasonable explanations and hurt feelings. "Jack, she was trying to create problems where none exist. We can't have someone spreading paranoia through the firm. It's bad for morale." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But Sarah's evidence had planted a seed of doubt, and once it took root, I couldn't ignore the signs. The way Richard insisted on personally handling certain client accounts. The mysterious trips to the Cayman Islands. The new shell companies appearing in our corporate structure with Byzantine ownership trails. I started my own investigation, carefully, quietly. What I discovered made me physically ill. Richard hadn't just been skimming from our clients, he'd built an elaborate pyramid scheme that would make Bernie Madoff proud. Billions in client funds had been diverted through a maze of offshore accounts and shell companies. And the paperwork trail, it all led back to me. That's when I realized the true genius of his plan. Every fraudulent transaction, every illegal transfer, had been processed using my security credentials. He'd been setting me up as the fall guy for years. The day I confronted him with evidence of his fraud was the day he sprung his trap. Within hours, I was locked out of our systems. By the next morning, an anonymous whistleblower had provided authorities with evidence of my crimes. Richard played the part of the shocked and betrayed partner perfectly. He even shed tears during the press conference where he announced my removal from the firm. I lost everything. My assets were frozen. My reputation was destroyed. Even my own mother called to ask if the accusations were true. I was toxic in the industry, no firm would touch me with a 10-foot pole. Richard had orchestrated my professional execution with surgical precision. Most people would have given up. Filed for bankruptcy. Maybe written a tell-all book. But most people hadn't spent 15 years learning how the darkest corners of Wall Street really worked. They say the best cons are the ones where the mark thinks they're the con man. It took me 6 months to set up the pieces. First, I needed capital. I reached out to Angela Martinez, a former client who'd pulled her money from Paramount months before the scandal broke. She'd always had a sixth sense about people, and she'd never trusted Richard. "Jack, I knew you weren't behind it," she told me over coffee in a quiet cafe in Greenwich Village. Richard's smile was too perfect. Like a shark's. With Angela's seed funding, I created Genesis Capital Solutions. On paper, it was a Dubai-based investment firm specializing in cryptocurrency arbitrage. In reality, it was an elaborate facade, complete with fake offices, paid actors posing as executives, and a digital footprint that would withstand all but the most thorough investigation. The next phase required patience. I leaked rumors about Genesis's revolutionary trading algorithm through carefully chosen channels. Stories about returns that seemed too good to be true started circulating in the right circles. I knew Richard's weakness, he couldn't resist an edge, especially one that his competitors might get to first. When Genesis's representative, a former actor I'd hired from an experimental theater company in Brooklyn, approached Paramount with an offer of an exclusive partnership, Richard was already hooked. The numbers were astronomical, a joint venture that would generate billions in risk-free arbitrage profits by exploiting cryptocurrency price differences across Asian markets. The deal was too good to be true, and Richard knew it. That's why he spent 3 months having his team investigate Genesis. They found exactly what I wanted them to find, a legitimate-seeming operation with just enough shadows around the edges to convince Richard he was the one running a con. He thought he was going to take Genesis for everything we had. In reality, every document he signed, every email he sent, every meeting he took was another strand in the web I was weaving around him. The same techniques he'd used to frame me were now being turned against him, but with one crucial difference: I had learned from his mistakes. The final meeting was held in our old conference room, the one with the view of Central Park that we'd once dreamed about during our Goldman days. I watched through hidden cameras as Richard signed the final papers with that same confident smile. He thought he was moments away from pulling off the biggest heist of his career. Instead, he watched in horror as FBI agents poured into the room. Every document he'd signed contained coded admissions to his original crimes. Every email he'd sent had been carefully crafted to reveal his previous frauds. The Genesis deal wasn't just a sting, it was a confession. The look on his face when he realized the truth was worth every second of the 2 years I'd spent planning his downfall. But the real satisfaction came from what happened next. As Richard was led away in handcuffs, Sarah Chen walked into the room, flanked by SEC investigators. She'd been working with me the whole time, building an airtight case while Richard thought she'd been neutralized. The aftermath was everything I'd hoped for. Richard was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Paramount's legitimate assets were transferred to a new management team. Most importantly, our defrauded clients got their money back. I'd made sure Richard's personal fortune was secured as restitution before springing the trap. Today, I run a smaller, more ethical investment firm. Our client contracts are transparent, our compliance department has real power, and we don't do business with anyone who has that particular kind of smile. Sarah serves on our board of directors, and Angela's initial investment has grown into a substantial stake in the company. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Richard sitting in his cell in Fort Dix, probably still trying to figure out exactly when I started turning his own game against him. The truth is, his betrayal taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. On Wall Street, trust is worth more than gold, and revenge is worth more than both, but only if you're willing to spend years serving it at exactly the right temperature. The day he's released, there will be a letter waiting for him. Inside, he'll find a single piece of paper with an account number and a balance, $127,849,023.18. The exact amount he stole from our clients, down to the penny. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just destroying someone's life, it's making sure they know exactly why they deserved it. But revenge, like most things on Wall Street, comes with its own price. The 2 years I spent orchestrating Richard's downfall changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. I became obsessed with details, paranoid about trust, constantly looking over my shoulder for the next betrayal. The line between justice and vengeance started to blur, and there were moments when I caught myself smiling that same shark-like smile I'd seen so many times on Richard's face. The truth is, bringing down Richard wasn't just about justice, it was about survival. In our world, reputation is everything. As long as I was seen as the corrupt partner who had betrayed his clients, I was as good as dead. The only way to clear my name was to destroy the man who had framed me. But destroying someone completely, utterly, irrevocably, it requires you to embrace the darkness within yourself. I remember the night I realized how far I'd gone. I was sitting in my temporary office, a converted storage unit in Brooklyn where I'd set up the command center for Operation Genesis. The walls were covered with flowcharts mapping out Richard's movements, his weaknesses, his psychological pressure points. I had surveillance photos, financial records, personal correspondence, 2 years of his life meticulously documented and analyzed. Sarah found me there at 3 a.m., staring at a photo of Richard with his family at his daughter's graduation. "Jack," she said, "you're starting to sound like him." She was right. In my pursuit of revenge, I'd adopted Richard's methodical ruthlessness, his attention to detail, his ability to rationalize increasingly extreme measures. The only difference was my endgame. Instead of stealing money, I was pursuing justice. At least, that's what I told myself. The Genesis operation itself was a masterpiece of deception that would have made Richard proud. Every detail was crafted to appeal to his specific psychological profile. The mysterious Dubai company, the too-good-to-be-true returns, the carefully orchestrated leaks about our proprietary trading algorithm, it was all designed to create an irresistible trap. I hired actors to play key roles, but not just any actors. Each one was carefully chosen to mirror people Richard had successfully conned in the past. The Genesis CEO was played by a former Royal Shakespeare Company member who had an uncanny ability to project both trustworthiness and slight vulnerability, exactly the type of mark Richard preferred. The offshore offices, the fake trading floors, the elaborately staged phone calls between Asian exchanges, everything was designed to convince Richard that he was the smartest person in the room, that he had figured out the con before anyone else. His own arrogance became the perfect blind spot. The technical aspects of the sting were equally complex. We created a complete digital infrastructure for Genesis, including backdated trading records, regulatory filings, and a complex web of seemingly legitimate business relationships. Every document was crafted to withstand scrutiny while containing hidden traces of Richard's original crimes. The cryptocurrency angle was particularly inspired, if I do say so myself. Richard had always dismissed crypto as a fad, which made it the perfect vehicle for our scheme. He was just knowledgeable enough to believe he understood it, but not familiar enough to spot the inconsistencies in our proposed trading strategy. His desire to prove his superiority in a new market became another weapon in our arsenal. But the true genius of the plan lay in its psychological manipulation. Every step was designed to make Richard feel like he was in control, like he was the one exploiting us. We fed his ego, his greed, and most importantly, his conviction that he was smarter than everyone else. The FBI raid wasn't just choreographed, it was timed to the second. We knew Richard's habits, his tendencies, his tells. We knew he would try to delete incriminating evidence the moment he realized something was wrong, so we made sure the agents breached the room at exactly the right moment to catch him in the act. That single moment of panic, captured on multiple cameras, became a key piece of evidence in his trial. The aftermath was more complex than the newspapers reported. Yes, Richard went to prison, and yes, the clients got their money back. But the ripple effects of his downfall touched hundreds of lives. Junior traders who had worked for us, administrative staff, even the cleaning crew, everyone connected to Paramount had to rebuild their careers in the wake of the scandal. I made sure to take care of the innocent casualties. Anonymous job recommendations appeared at just the right moments. Unexpected bonuses were discovered in overlooked accounts. A scholarship fund was established for employees' children. These weren't acts of charity, they were part of my penance for becoming the very thing I had set out to destroy. The hardest part wasn't bringing Richard down. It was looking in the mirror afterward and recognizing that I had become capable of the same kind of calculated destruction that he had specialized in. The only difference was my motivation. They say that when you set out for revenge, you should dig 2 graves. What they don't tell you is that the second grave is for the person you used to be. The Jack Thompson who started this journey, the trusting partner, the ethical broker, the man who believed in the fundamental goodness of people, that man died somewhere along the way. In his place emerged someone new. Someone harder, colder, more careful. Someone who understands that in the world of high finance, trust isn't just measured in dollars and cents, it's measured in the ability to destroy those who would betray it. I keep Richard's signed confession framed on my wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that justice and revenge aren't always different things, that sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to become one yourself, if only temporarily. A reminder that every smile might hide sharp teeth, and that trust, once broken, becomes the deadliest weapon of all. As for Richard, I know he spends his days in prison teaching other inmates about financial markets. Old habits die hard, I suppose. Sometimes I wonder if he's proud of what he created, not the fraud or the scheme, but the transformation he triggered in me. After all, he didn't just teach me about betrayal. He taught me how to turn trust itself into a weapon. The last time I visited him in prison, the only time I visited, he looked at me with something close to admiration. "You became better at being me than I was," he said. I smiled back, the same smile I'd learned from him. "No, Richard. I became better at destroying you than you were at destroying me. There's a difference. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I wonder if there really is. The true cost of revenge isn't measured in dollars or prison sentences. It's measured in the subtle ways it reshapes your world." After Richard's conviction, I found myself building my new firm like a fortress. Every employee undergoes extensive background checks. Every transaction is triple verified. Every client relationship is managed with a combination of warmth and warranted paranoia. Sarah says I've turned paranoia into an art form, but she understands. She was there when we discovered the full extent of Richard's betrayal, when we realized how deep the corruption had spread through Paramount's infrastructure. It wasn't just Richard. He had cultivated a small circle of loyal employees who helped facilitate his schemes. Each of them had been carefully chosen, gradually corrupted, until they were too complicit to turn back. The investigation revealed a pattern that still haunts me. Richard had an eye for people's weaknesses. The junior trader with gambling debts. The compliance officer with a sick child and overwhelming medical bills. The IT manager whose green card status was in question. He didn't just exploit their financial vulnerabilities, he made them feel seen, understood, protected. He turned their desperation into loyalty. That's the part that keeps me up at night. Not the stolen money or the fraudulent trades, but the way he transformed good people into willing accomplices. He was building more than a pyramid scheme, he was creating a mirror image of himself, fractured across dozens of souls. During the trial, one of his former protégés broke down on the stand. "Mr. Collins made you feel special," she testified, tears streaming down her face. "Like you were finally part of something bigger than yourself. By the time you realized what that something was, it was too late." I recognized that feeling. Hadn't I felt the same way when Richard and I first partnered up? That intoxicating sense of being understood, being valued, being part of something extraordinary. The only difference was that I had seen through his manipulation before it was too late. Or at least, that's what I tell myself. The truth I've never admitted to anyone, not even Sarah, is that part of me admired Richard's methodology even as I worked to destroy him. The way he could read people, find their pressure points, turn their deepest needs into weapons against them, it was a kind of dark artistry. An artistry I found myself emulating as I constructed his downfall. The Genesis operation wasn't just about creating a fake company. It was about understanding Richard's psychology so completely that we could predict his every move. We studied his past schemes, his behavioral patterns, his decision-making process. We created a psychological profile so detailed it would have made FBI profilers jealous. Every piece of the con was tailored to appeal to specific aspects of his personality. The cryptocurrency angle played to his fear of becoming obsolete in a changing market. The Dubai connection appealed to his love of exotic, loosely regulated financial environments. Even the name Genesis was chosen deliberately, a subtle reference to his ego, his desire to be seen as a creator, an originator, a financial god. The actors we hired weren't just playing roles, they were inhabiting carefully crafted personas designed to trigger Richard's predatory instincts. Our fake CEO had a slight stutter when discussing technical details, just enough to make Richard feel intellectually superior. Our CFO wore suits that were a size too large, creating an impression of someone trying too hard to fit into the financial world. Every detail was calculated to make Richard believe he was the smartest person in the room. We even manipulated his daily routine. Anonymous tips about Genesis were strategically planted in his favorite financial blogs. Conversations about our mysterious trading algorithm were staged in his regular lunch spots. We turned his entire world into an elaborate stage, and he never suspected he was the only one who didn't know his lines. The psychological warfare extended to his personal life as well. We knew his patterns, his habits, his weaknesses. We knew he checked his daughter's social media every night before bed, so we made sure rumors about Genesis appeared in the financial news sites she followed. We knew he had a standing weekly tennis game with other finance executives, so we arranged for conversations about our company's incredible returns to occur within earshot. But the most insidious part of our plan wasn't the manipulation, it was the truth. Every document we created contained real evidence of his crimes, hidden in plain sight. Every meeting we arranged gave him another opportunity to incriminate himself. We didn't have to fabricate evidence, we just had to create situations where he would reveal what he had already done. The moment of his arrest was choreographed like a symphony. The FBI agents breaching the room. The SEC investigators emerging from behind closed doors. Sarah walking in with the final piece of evidence. Even the handcuffs were symbolic, they were the same model used to arrest Bernie Madoff, a detail I knew would eat at Richard's ego. In the end, Richard's conviction wasn't just about justice. It was about understanding that sometimes the only way to fight a monster is to learn its methods, adopt its tactics, and turn them back upon itself. It's about accepting that revenge, true revenge, requires a willingness to transform yourself into something both more and less than what you were before. The new firm I built from the ashes of this experience is different from anything else on Wall Street. We operate with a level of transparency that makes other firms uncomfortable. Every trade, every transaction, every decision is documented and accessible to our clients. We've turned paranoia into a business model, trust into a measurable commodity. But the real innovation isn't in our compliance procedures or our security protocols. It's in our understanding of human nature. Richard taught all of us, that the greatest threat to any system isn't technology or regulation or market forces. It's the capacity for betrayal that exists in every human heart. So we built a firm that assumes betrayal is always possible, that trust must be earned and verified daily, that loyalty is measured in actions rather than words. Our employees are well paid, well treated, and extensively monitored. Our clients receive levels of disclosure that would make most firms blanch. We've created an environment where transparency isn't just a buzzword, it's a survival strategy. The irony isn't lost on me. In destroying Richard's empire of lies, I created something that could only exist because of the lessons he taught me. Every security measure, every compliance protocol, every psychological profile we create for potential clients and employees, they all stem from understanding how he thought, how he operated, how he turned trust into a weapon.